Alright guys, this video we're just gonna go and focus on how to implement the MQL scoring system in Jotform. So for the purpose of this video, I'm just gonna do a quick recap of what we've discussed in terms of why the MQL is beneficial for your business, how to set it up, and then the BANT framework for qualifying leads for budget, authority, necessity, and timeline. And I put two examples here of types of questions because there's a couple of things that I'd like to highlight between the differences of B2B and B2C. If you're selling B2B, you can be a little bit more specific on the qualification. You can literally ask like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Can you make the decision during the call to solve this problem? How much money do you have set aside to solve this? And how soon do you want to solve this problem? When you're asking B2B, people are less sensitive to those types of questions, right? But when you're asking B2C, typically what you want to do is you want to disguise the BANT in your form as part of your marketing message. And the reason why this is important is because if in the case of one of our clients that we scale from 0 to 150 million in 3 years, if you're asking somebody filling out a fitness quiz, hey, can you make the decision in the call? How much money do you have set aside? And things along those lines, you're going to scare people off. They're automatically going to know it's going to be a sales call and it's not going to be a value driven call. So just pay attention if you're doing B2C to try to communicate and qualify the information in your form in a way that it's also copywriting, right? You also want to, when you're asking the question, you want to touch on their pain. You don't necessarily just want to ask something like this where it's like, pick the statement that feels most like you today, because you also want to highlight the pain that they're having right now. So if it's losing weight, it's feeling stuck, or browsing ideas for later, for example, if the focus is losing weight, so it's like, how long have you been struggling to lose weight? It's more of something that they're going to repeat to themselves, the pain that they're having, and it's going to correlate with higher conversions. And I can show you the proof if you like, but in this video, I'm just going to focus on the implementation itself. But with that being said, what we're going to be covering here is the implementation of these questions inside Jotform and setting it up, the redirect for routing the best leads to the best closers. So once you log into Jotform, you're going to create a form. And then when you click to create a form, you just want to start from scratch and create a card form. And once you create the card form, what you'll see is that you're just going to add these questions right away. You're going to put the first name, last name, their email, and their phone number. When you are putting the email, there's something that we've implemented, at least this is not related to MQL, but it's also a nice tip if you're using Jotform. What we use is we use this widget here where it spell check email addresses before they're submitted, because we're dealing with such a high volume of people that sometimes they just put their email like this, for example. So they would just do something like test@gmail.com. And then this would get submitted as an email. The email is invalid. It's going to bounce. So when you put this widget here for email qualification, email correctness check, if they do any typos, if they make any typos, it's going to automatically correct. So that's a nice tip right there. But when you put this information here, it's pretty basic. What you want to put is this form calculation widget. So you're going to go to widgets, and it's the first option over here, form calculation widget. Once you add this, basically you will see that the information is visible on your form and it's just showing with this title. Now what you want to do is just understand how it works. Essentially we have this calculation widget where as you add a field, this just show all the questions that you have inside your form. So for every question that you're using for MQL scoring, you want to add these questions as part of the calculation here. All right. And when the form is submitted, this will spit out a number based on the calculation values of the options here. And I'll show you everything, but I'm just explaining how this works. All right, so let's start by putting some of these questions here. The B2C example of the fitness company. So let's just get this statement here and just go with the single option choice. I just want to pull this all the way up here. And I'll go over these hidden fields in just a sec, guys. I just want to make sure focus on the MQL scoring first. And then we're just going to copy this information here. In this case, you're going to put your questions in your form. And then I'm just going to copy all of this stuff here. And I'm just going to click properties, options, and just paste it right in. I don't want to focus on fixing the formatting because it won't change the value of the video. I just want to focus on explaining this, which is the calculation values. So the way we do the MQL scoring, at least in the beginning, it's going to be by doing the BANT framework. If you don't have historical data, that will give you the highest proven, scientifically proven probability of qualifying your leads better. But we're just going to use these calculation values to make sure that that's the way we're going to be ranking these information. So if the person that must lose weight for an event coming soon is a 25 point, I just want to add 25 points here in the calculation value. This other person is 20 points and this other person is 10 points. So I just want to add this information here. Okay. Then what I'll do is I'm going to get the other question here, and I'll just duplicate this. I will paste the question, and then I will just get these questions here. I'll get these options here. I'll paste them in, and I'm just going to replace the numbers in the calculation values. So I'm just going to put 25, 20, 10. Okay. And then I'm going to repeat this process for the other two missing questions. All right. And then I'm just going to paste this right here, and I'm going to be updating this information here. All right, cool guys. So we've added our questions here. So what we'll do now is we're going to use the widget that we've added. In this case, I've added a new widget here that is called calculation. But as you can see, I already had the widget here called MQL Score. I'm just going to delete this widget. And then you will have this form value here that you put, and then we're going to name this MQL Score. Then what we'll do is we want to click on widget settings, and we want to add the fields that we've used in our BANT framework, or the fields that you were able to scrape based on the tutorial in the previous video to find which values in your form are already playing a higher role in the conversions. Okay, so we're going to use this, and then we're going to add a plus sign here, and we're going to do this. Okay, so we have all of our fields here, and then we're just going to hit save. All right, and I'm just going to preview the form here real quick to show you how the numbers change. So I'm just going to go here, preview form, put my first name here, my last name here. I'm going to show you the example of the typo here as well. So if I try to hit next, you can see that there's an issue here and when submitting the information, so I need to put it properly. Sorry guys, we needed to put this information here in terms of the optional settings, but it looks like it's being forced to be used. But again, just going back to this, we just want to go back here, put the name here, put the example email here. For example, you'll see that it will just automatically correct. Then we're going to hit next, and I'm just going to put like a phone number here. And now we're going to start using the MQL qualification process, right? So I'm just going to type this here, put this here, here, and here. And then you can see that the value of the MQL already changed here, right? So what do we do with this information is what comes next. So we're going to go here into the settings. We're going to go in conditions. And then in conditions, you will see that there's these three variables here that this is how we're going to build them. So you're going to use these conditions here, and then you're going to use the change thank you page. And then based on the MQL score, you're going to use these variables to determine which scores should go to the best closers, middle closers, and bottom closers. In the case of our calculations, we use, for example, anything above 72 goes to the tier 1 closers, which are the best closers. Anything between 55 and 72 goes to the tier 2 closers, which sometimes, I would say for the most part, are also tier 1 closers. Why do we just don't have everybody on the same calendar? In our case, the amount of volume that we have, we don't necessarily have all tier 1 closers in the tier 2 calendar. So basically, it's recommended to have 3 tiers, because also depending on the volume of leads that you're generating, you can balance out the calendar capacity. So if let's say you're generating less leads and you want to make sure the tier 1 closers, they are receiving more leads, you can reduce this to 45, and that way like you will also increase the volume of leads that goes to the best closers to make sure their calendar are filled. But in this case, we just do 55 for tier 3 closers, which are the closers that are the ones that are being onboarded, right? It's the ones that we don't want to burn through the highest MQL leads with these closers, okay? So that's what we do, and how we do it in Jotform is by going here on the change thank you page, and then we're gonna do these values here. So if the MQL score is greater than 72, we're going to redirect to the tier 1 URL. And I'm just going to show you how that looks like in the CRM. Basically, in the CRM, this is the sample CRM that you get 1 year free access included with the program. You will have just clear visibility here on how the tiers are structured, right? And then basically each booking page will have its own URL. So essentially what we're doing here is whenever, and these URLs, they're the exact match. So they're just replicas of one another. here, the only difference is the calendar embed that is inside the URL. Okay, so that is uniquely the only difference, but because you need these 3 different pages in order to be able to properly redirect your highest MQL leads. Okay, so that touches on how to set that up in Jotform, but also explaining a little bit on how do we do the routing for the BAS closers. Okay, so when we get this URL here, this example, I'm just gonna get this preview URL. You'll just put this here, and this is gonna be your preview or your URL. But a little trick here that you want to do is you want to forward these booking parameters. In our case, like some clients we don't do because of compliance, but for your case, like if you're doing 200k, 100k, 300k, this is almost guaranteed. This is like free money, and this is free money based on data. I'm not just pulling this out of my armpit. And the reason it's free money is because you're just gonna be forwarding the URL parameters that will pre-fill the booking page. Let me finish like the conditions and then I'll go on touch on that. But basically here, this is like the tier 1 page. So I'll just put here tier 1. Okay, and then essentially what we're doing is just putting these fields here. If MQL is less than 72 and greater than 55, then redirect to tier 2. So if MQL is less than 72 and greater than 55, we're going to be redirecting to the tier 2 page. Okay, and then what we do now is just basically the last page, which is the MQL is less than 55. We're going to be redirecting to the tier 3 page. Okay, and the free money thing that we're doing here is going to delete these for the sake of the example. Is whenever the person is submitting their application in any field inside your form, these fields here in Jotform, they're gonna have a field detail. All right, and this is the unique name that can be used to pre-populate fields from a URL and pass data to another form automatically. Okay, so what we do with this is essentially we're forwarding this information through the URL so that once the customer lands on the calendar page, this information is already pre-filled on their behalf. And the benefit of this is that they won't have to retype the data, and by not retyping the data, they're gonna be more likely to book the call. And this is guaranteed in terms of increasing your results, because I've tested this in multiple clients, multiple funnels. So how does it work is we have these values here, and then essentially what we do is we just add this question mark, and then we put this value here, and then we put the value name like this. Okay, the reason why it's unlikely to work 100%, it's because I'm using a preview URL. Yeah, so it's not going to work because there's no tier 3 URL here. Let me see if I can try to make this work just with the preview URL. Yeah, it's not going to work because there's no URL enabled here. So, but essentially, like, you're not going to be able to get the tiers here. But for the sake of the example, what I'm just going to share here, it's like in your calendar, in your GoHighLevel calendar, in your OneSub calendar, inside the calendar, at least for example here in GoHighLevel, you have this form information here, right? And then you can see that the query name is called name, and then the query name here is called email. So what we're doing is we're just passing this data through the URL from Jotform to the funnel. Okay, and that works with OneSub, that works with Typeform, that works with Jotform, that works with any form. All right, so essentially what we're doing is we're forwarding this data here. So let's say, and then we're just putting here last name, and then once we pre-fill, like we put this data here in Jotform, whenever someone lands in the funnel, all their information is going to already be pre-filled. So all they need to do is just click done. This drastically improves your conversions. So the way that you're going to do this is when you go to Typeform or Jotform, in this case, I'll show you the Typeform example later in another video. You're just going to put this information here. And then where I put like my information, you just want to put the values in the form. Okay. So in the case of that OneSub form, the query, as we're showing here in GoHighLevel, for example, was called name. So I'm just putting name here, and then last name, I'm putting last name here, and then email, I'm putting email here, and then the mobile, I'm putting the mobile here. Okay, so if I save this, and this was 55 MQL, and I test this, when I pre-fill the form, I'm gonna land on the page and my information's all gonna be filled already, and you can split test this. You're likely gonna increase your conversions by at least 2 to 3%. So the other thing that you want to be paying attention here when setting it up, the MQL process inside Jotform, is that you want to make sure this MQL value here, it's hidden. So you want to hide this field, so once the customer, the contact, the lead is submitting the form, they're not going to see this information, okay? But this example, I'm just going to show this, and then these other variables here that you're seeing, because I said I was going to explain, this is just for data tracking. It's not really necessary like for just starting out, but the idea with this is just to get the URLs they came from, their geolocation, their Google Analytics is to see the form drop off. The user agent is just to see like the device they submitted the form from, and then the hidden box also gets like their device language and stuff like that. So these aren't necessarily part of the MQL conversation, but for example, I'm just going to submit this data here. And I'm just going to put the low values here to get a low MQL. And then when I submit, the reason why it didn't work is because I kept those tiers there, the tier redirect. But when we look at the conditions here and we are redirecting, what we want to see is we're just going to remove these values here. I'm actually going to remove to make sure like we know what we're doing here, in the sense of you can actually see the information. And I'm also going to put all these values on these other forms. And then when I resubmit, it will redirect with the pre-filled data. It looks like in the URL, the first name value here needs to be first name. Then we have name here, first name. I think what I did incorrectly here was this little bracket here. I think I made a typo there, so I just need to redo this. It's very important that you make sure that these values here, they're just properly set up. But let me just refresh, go back here. We go to preview, we go to put the form information, then we put this data here. And once we submit, you will see that in the URL, the fields are going to be forwarded, and once the customer comes here, he would be already with the information submitted. Okay, and same for the mobile. Looks like I made a little typo here, so I'm just gonna redo this. And typically, guys, that's how it works. Okay, like I'm not wanting to come here and just sell you something that it's not true. There's always those little attention to detail things that we must be on top of it in order to successfully create these workflows. So this should work perfectly in terms of not only setting it up your MQL, but also improving your form conversion rates. So here you'll see that in the URL, the information is being passed, and when you go to the form, all the information is already pre-filled. All right, so this is how you do the MQL. This is how you create a calculated value. You're also figuring out here, learning how to redirect these customers to the BAS closers, and how to forward the URL parameters whenever there is a form submission to increase your conversion rates. Okay, so this video covered a lot more than I was anticipating, but it's going to be incredibly valuable for you to best segment your customers, improve your marketing spend by improving your conversion rates, and also giving the best leads to the best closers. Okay, so if you have any questions about Typeform, how to set this up, and you need more support, just comment on the chat. Like, we're not going to leave you behind. We're just going to make sure that you succeed. So I need your feedback to make this better. Okay, so if there's something that wasn't unclear, I'm more than happy to re-record the video, as long as you tell me. All right, so see you in the next one.